Welcome to Chasing Excellence, the informative, educational, and entertaining podcast series featuring positive and inspiring stories of entrepreneurs. Now, here's your host, Kathy Hogan.
Hello, friends. Welcome, welcome. I am so excited about today's show because I have the privilege of introducing you to our new quarterly mini-series called Legal Ease with attorney Jennifer DeLoach. If you heard my show back in April, you got to hear her share all of her great information on divorce, and it was very helpful. And I was so impressed with how she spoke, what she spoke of, and her laid-back manner that made everything seem so easy to understand that I thought, hey, this might be a good idea for another show. So without further ado, I would like to introduce you again, if you did not hear, to attorney Jennifer DeLoach.
Hi there, Kathy.
Hey, Jen. How are you?
Wonderful. Thank you for having me.
Great, great, great. For those who didn't get a chance to hear you in April, would you give us a little bit of your background so we can get started on this, and then we'll jump into your topic, which is estate planning.
Sure. I am an attorney in Lawrenceville, Georgia. I actually grew up in Lawrenceville, about 15 minutes from where my office is now. And I have been practicing in the family law and probate estate planning spaces for a few years now. So working in the wonderful areas of death and divorce, helping people through some of life's sort of more challenging things that you can go through, and also helping people plan for how to navigate those things with the quality estate plan, which is what we're talking about today. And I always try to speak to people as plain English as I can. I think some people get very intimidated by the legal system and by attorneys, and they feel like it's designed to be confusing. And so part of my job, I think, is to try to make it a little less confusing so that people aren't intimidated and they go in feeling that they have information and somebody who's willing to listen to their questions and answer them in a way that's designed to educate, not to confuse.
That's so important for families. And I agree with you on the intimidation. People are afraid of law for some reason. I think there's a bad connotation to it. You know,
it can be scary.
It can be if you don't know. And I'm the kind of person that I don't go into any situation unless I research ahead of time, and it doesn't matter what the topic is. So knowledge is power, right?
Absolutely.
And that's what you want to do. You want to empower your customers, your clients, what have you. Okay. All right. Let me start by asking you a question. Why do so many people think that they don't need an estate plan?
Oh, that's really a great question. And I read recently that about 70% of Americans at the time of their death don't have any kind of estate plan. There's no will. There's really nothing to guide their families in what they want to happen once they're gone. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Some people hear the words estate plan, and when you hear estate, you conjure up this mansion on rolling hills, and you think that's only for rich people.
Right.
And I'm middle class, or I'm not even middle, I don't need that. So that's one thing. And then a lot of people assume that the law is set up to just take care of them. When I pass, of course, my wife, my husband will be taken care of. Or, well, I just assume that if I died, if I'm not married, everything goes to my kids equally. And so there's a lot of assumptions being made. Some folks don't realize that if someone passes away and the mortgage is in their name, simply paying the mortgage doesn't make the house yours. There are a lot of just misunderstandings, and people don't realize how important it is. And there's also a disconnect because it's an uncomfortable topic. We all know logically that we all have to die. That's going to happen to all of us, hopefully not for a long time, but it's something we can't avoid. There's also other things that happen that aren't death that can make things very hard on our family. A diagnosis of Alzheimer's or dementia might rob us of our capacity to make our own medical decisions, to manage our own financial affairs. And so it's important when we have capacity to go ahead and say what we'd like to happen and who we want to be in charge of those decisions later. So there's a lot of aspects to estate planning that touch every single person alive. Whether you're a pauper or a prince, you need an estate plan. Your family needs that protection.
Okay, that's great. It is intimidating, as I said before, and I know so many people that get to the end of life and they don't even know what they have.
Yeah, I can't even tell you, Kathy, how many times I get phone calls from people who are upset because their aging parent or their spouse has been diagnosed with something. and needs a power of attorney, for instance, so they can get them into some long-term care, some assisted living. And it breaks my heart every time I have to tell them, your husband, your father, whoever it is, doesn't have capacity to do a power of attorney now. He can't appoint you. That's something that you have to do when you still have capacity. The law does provide ways to take care of those people in the form of guardianship and conservatorship, and those are things that I handle as well. And I really am glad to be able to be there and walk families through that. It is more complicated and it is more expensive. So the most cost-effective way to do it, to take care of your family, is to do an estate plan when you are younger, or at least you still have capacity.
I think too many people wait until it's too late, and then they put themselves in a hot mess. But it just makes more sense, especially with the economy, the way it's going and everything. You've got to pre-plan. You've got to think about yourself and your heirs.
Right. And it's kind of like life insurance too sometimes. No one wants to, there's always something we'd rather spend our money on.
Absolutely. And it's not insurance.
Than some of this. And so you say, I might never need it. And hopefully you won't. That's the plan. You will eventually need a will. It's not for us so much as it is for our families. And there will come a time when that is important.
Yeah. Well, speaking of wills, what's the big difference between a will and a trust? And how do I know which one I need?
There you go. So a will, basically, that's what most people have. And honestly, everybody needs one, even if you have a trust. Trusts are really great tools that are perfect fits for certain people in certain situations. So a will, last will and testament, is just a way to tell everybody, this is what I want to happen to my assets when I'm gone. Mm-hmm. This is how I'd like to leave things set up. This is the person I'd like to be in charge of handling my affairs. And if you have minor children and you and your spouse happen to go, God forbid, at the same time before they're adults, who would you like to take care of them? And so a will does all of that. But if I'm leaving somebody a gift in my will, they are going to receive all of it at once when my estate is probated. Through a trust, I can do a lot of different things. I don't have to leave it to somebody to receive all at once. I can set up allowances to where they receive a certain amount every year. I can put money in the hands of somebody a little older and wiser, for instance, if I'm leaving behind younger children, so that they don't manage it themselves. There's somebody else looking out for it for them. And so it gives you a little bit more freedom. Trusts are also a great way to avoid probate. And so that's a phrase a lot of people hear. And when I say probate, that's the process of actually administering a will, filing it with a court, having an executor appointed, and having that executor actually oversee handing out all of your assets, paying off all of your debts. And that's a long process sometimes, but here in Georgia, it's not nearly as scary as it is in some states. Mm-hmm. We're actually really efficient when compared to a lot of other states. There's no estate tax here in Georgia. The federal government has one, but it doesn't kick in until your estate's worth nearly $13 million. So,
well, I don't have to worry about that one.
Most people don't. Most people don't. And so that's not a scary thing here. But one of the most attractive things about trust until recently was it was the only way to leave real estate to your beneficiaries without the estate having to go through probate. And as of a few months ago, Georgia has this new type of deed called a ladybird deed. That's sort of a transfer on death deed. Okay. So you can continue to own your home and it will pass directly to whoever you name, say your adult children or whoever, upon your death, which is really good. I used to have to counsel my clients who wanted to do that to spend extra money on a trust. That was the only option until this summer. And so it was never really a good idea to put adult children on the deed with you, because sometimes that means you're going to lose that beautiful school tax exemption. And so I didn't want to cost anybody money. So this is a great thing that Georgia has just recently done. I've done a few of them already, and they just became legal recently. But trusts also, there's different kinds. They can be great for asset protection. If you have a child that you dearly love and want to provide for, but maybe he or she has special needs and will never be able to independently manage their own money, a trust is a great solution to make sure you're providing for them, but they're not responsible for it directly, and it can't be counted against them in receiving benefits from the state. Also, if you have a child that you love and want to provide for, but maybe they have an addiction or a spending problem, right, or a tax issue with Uncle Sam, and so you don't want to put your entire life's work into their hands at once. If someone else is going to come take it, or if you have concerns that in a time of deep grief, they might relapse and spend it on that. And so trust can be really great tools for people.
You know, that's funny. I was having a conversation with my daughter a couple of weeks ago, and I was looking at homes in Florida to build for later on. And she, was sharing this information with her, and I said, well, you guys are going to end up getting it. She has two brothers. You guys are going to end up getting it when I'm gone. And she says, Mom, please tell me you haven't put this in a trust yet. She goes, you need to put this in a trust. I said, how do you know about a trust? We've never had that conversation before, but I was impressed that she knew.
I'm impressed that she knew.
She said, don't do anything. Don't just leave it to me. Make sure you put it in a trust. I was like, okay.
Yeah, she's thinking the right way, because honestly, even in the best case scenario, if you die with a will, you do everything right, probate is probate. Yeah. And so if you can avoid it, that's wonderful. Like I said, it's not as scary here in Georgia as it is in some states, where I would say everybody needs a trust. If you're in Florida, for instance, you need a trust, right? But not everybody does here, but it's always good to save that time and that money and that headache. So putting your property into a trust or setting up a ladybird deed, which we can talk about, is
interesting.
Definitely an interesting approach to estate planning.
Okay. When you do it, say you put property in a trust, does that help you with taxes also? Does it shield it from some taxation, or do we know?
This is one that I'm not allowed to answer.
Oh, okay, I understand. Okay,
I can't give you tax advice.
Call your accountant, and we will have to discuss.
I have a wonderful tax professional that I'll send you to. They can certainly shield your assets from collections and from judgments.
Okay.
So the two main types of trusts are revocable and irrevocable.
Right.
And so just as the names imply, a revocable trust can be changed. Things can be moved in and moved out, and you can be the trustee. So you can set it up, put all of your assets in there, and then you act as trustee, which is sort of like being the manager of a business. You can still decide to sell off the assets, to move them out. With an irrevocable trust, you can't be the trustee. So you can set it up, you put all of your assets in there, and the catch is neither you nor your spouse, if you're married, can be the trustees. So that begs the question, well, why would anybody want to put all of their assets into a box that they don't control? And the answer is because it offers enormous protections that a revocable trust does not. With an irrevocable trust, you can go to a judge and swear hand on heart, I don't control it. I don't own it. I can't sell it if I want to. Somebody else is in control of that. And that means that when the government is looking at your net worth, for instance, to determine how much Medicare you're going to get later on, if you have to go into assisted living or memory care, they can't count those assets against you.
Good.
They can't spend you down to your last dime.
Gotcha.
Which is wonderful. So it offers tremendous protections, but it does come at the cost of you're not really in control.
Okay. Speaking of being in control, you mentioned, I guess, trust for maybe a child, an adult child even, that has special needs.
Sure.
And when you're gone, you leave this in the trust. Does the trust, do they assign a guardian, and do they pay a guardian to take care of that part of the program there?
It can be part of the program, absolutely. And there are some lawyers who specialize only in special needs trusts, and I've done a few of them, and it's very rewarding.
Yeah.
Because for parents of any child, it doesn't really end when they become adults.
No.
And then parents of special needs, children with special needs especially, they know this child may or may not, of course there's a huge spectrum, but may or may not ever live independently, may or may not ever be capable of earning an income. And if that child owns too much in his or her own name, not only is it at risk because they may not be great at managing it or capable of managing it, but it can be counted against them in terms of net worth as well. And so having a special needs trust set up for that child's benefit is wonderful, because you can appoint somebody to be their trustee and make great decisions to help them with housing costs and medical costs, but not to have too much in that child's name directly.
Is there any restriction on who could be a trustee for them? Does it have to, or can you have a family member, or do you typically think it's better in their best interest to have somebody unassociated with the family?
It depends on the family.
Yeah.
For most people, it is a family member.
Okay.
Very often it's the parents during their lifetime, and then maybe it's a sibling after that, or it could be a family friend. It could be a professional fiduciary. It just really depends on that family's circumstances. Some families are blessed, and you've got several people who are perfectly willing to do it and very capable of doing it.
Right.
Other folks aren't so lucky.
And some people just don't want to be responsible for that.
Absolutely. And you mentioned being a guardian earlier, which is another term. So being a guardian of an adult would mean that you are responsible for making that person's healthcare decisions, deciding where they're going to live, who their doctors are going to be, what kind of treatment they're going to receive. Often a guardian and a conservator are either the same person or work together closely. Conservator is someone appointed to make financial decisions, to manage any income they have, if they receive an inheritance, and so ideally their money would be tied up in a trust and a trustee's managing that. But some people, maybe their parents didn't set up those trusts, and so they have a conservatorship account instead.
Gotcha. I love how you break down the terms. I think the terminology plays a part in why people are so scared of legal issues.
Absolutely.
Because they don't understand the big legal words. So I noticed that back in April when we were doing the divorce show, and you broke it down and you made it just like user-friendly that anybody could understand it. And I'm sitting there the whole time you were doing the show, and I was just going, yeah.
Good.
And I'm familiar with a lot of legal terms from, being in real estate for years, but the things you were talking about, I thought, most people wouldn't understand unless they had someone like you who is down to earth and brings it to their level and explains it.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah.
To me, that's the most important, probably the most important part of my job. It's definitely one of the most fun parts of my job.
Right.
I like that aspect of it. For 5 years, I was a public school teacher. And so I never mind being interrupted. Believe me, as a school teacher, I'm used to it. And I certainly don't mind answering questions, because my job isn't just to go in there and take people's money, to do a job that they never understand what I did or why I did it. I like to explain to them, these are all the different options. This is why this is a good option, but here's why you might want to consider that.
Right.
And just kind of make sure that they understand. If they're spending money with me and putting their trust in me, I want them to understand why we're doing what we're doing.
Right. Makes sense.
And it, a lot of our laws today and a lot of our legal terminology is from Old English. They're hundreds of years old, and it can be a very intimidating set of jargon.
Yeah.
Unless you really have it explained in plain English, and everybody deserves that.
Well, you do a great job of that. You just make them very comfortable.
Thank you.
And I highly recommend you to anyone that needs the service done. So, got another question for you, since we're going to move on a little bit.
Okay.
Say I become injured or develop dementia or Alzheimer's. Who will get to make the decisions on my behalf?
And so that comes down to how much planning did you do in advance?
We're talking about the planning.
Exactly.
So that's an important aspect in all of this, isn't it?
It is. So ideally, before you developed Alzheimer's or dementia, you came to see me or another lawyer. And there we go. And we put together an advanced healthcare directive, and we put together a power of attorney where you nominated someone to be your conservator, your guardian, in the event that ever happened to you. For most people, they're going to nominate their spouse. For some people, it's going to be a trusted adult child. And so whoever you nominate can then go to the court and ask to be appointed to make those decisions for you. Now, if you don't nominate somebody, then anyone can go and nominate themselves. So if, say, for instance, you didn't plan in advance and you're looking at a diagnosis of dementia and you can no longer make your own decisions or communicate them, then your spouse, your adult child, your neighbor next door, whoever, can go to court and say, Kathy's in terrible shape and she needs somebody else to make these decisions for her. The judge will then talk to that person. An attorney will be appointed to represent you as the proposed ward, and a determination is made as to your best interests. Number one, do you need somebody else to make these decisions for you? Number two, is the person asking the court for permission the best suited person to do this? And so the court looks at both of those things. And then if they are satisfied that there's a need and that person can do the job, they'll appoint that person to act on your behalf. And that can be anybody who nominates themselves, but the best policy is always to go see an attorney and to get that in writing before the need arises.
Right. And
then we hope that it never does, but it does for a lot of us.
And that could be a length of time too.
Absolutely.
I can speak from experience from my mom. We had to go through that with her, and we were my brother and I were assigned guardians, but she lived quite a bit longer than that. But
absolutely,
you have to plan that it may go longer than what you think.
It may, and then there's a long spectrum with a lot of people. There's a slow loss of memory. There's a slow loss of capacity. It doesn't happen overnight. And so when does it actually happen that the person needs someone else to step in? That's not a decision that you or I get to make on our own. It has to be made by a judge, and the judge isn't in a vacuum. They're talking to the family. They're looking at affidavits from doctors. There's an independent medical exam. And so they have a lot of different informed people helping them make that decision when it has to be made.
Well, you want the best person for that job because it's a hard job. Hard job taking care of all of that. And not only the technical side, the financial side, but the emotional side of all of that wears and tears on you. So for people that would be assigned a guard, I don't remember us involved in this part of it, but if you have to have a permanent or a full-time caretaker, does that factor into setting up how would you set that up to pay for a full-time?
Absolutely. So a full-time caretaker, whether you're moving in someplace or whether you're having people come to your home, that's very expensive.
It is.
And so, I mean, you've been through it. Yeah. We just lost my grandmother at 103.
I know, bless her heart.
And so my other grandmother's 100. So I'm already preparing.
You have good genes, don't you?
I am prepared to be here for a while. And so that's a lot of conversations that you've got to have, such as, if you think you're going to be here for 95 to 100 plus years, who's going to take care of me? And if I have an expensive illness, who's going to be with me and taking care of everything that needs to be taken care of? And who's going to pay for that at $200 to $400 a day? And ideally, you don't put yourself in a situation where everything you've worked for in your life is spent on this, that you still have something to leave the family if that's important to you. And so there are a lot of long-term care options that are offered by life insurance folks. I have a great network of people to send you to.
Good.
That's one of the greatest things I can do for my clients is I know wonderful life insurance folks. I know wonderful financial advisors. I know wonderful realtors, everything that kind of comes up in a divorce and in an estate planning situation. Right. And I like to have that team ready for them of people who can take care of them.
That's certainly added value to your client.
Absolutely.
They may not think of that at the beginning, but once you get into it, they realize after listening to you, I'm going to need to do this, I'm going to need this. And the first question I would think was, do you know anybody? And, of course, you're going to say, got the best.
I've got the best.
Yeah.
I only sent people to folks I've either used personally or that I know of. I've heard great testimonials about. And so, but in terms of just setting up long-term care, that would be something for the trustee or conservator to handle or your family to handle. Okay. So whoever's appointed to be conservator, and that's often the same person who's acting as guardian, but not always.
Right.
They are going to be in charge of handling the ward's assets once somebody has lost capacity, and that person's assets can and should be used to take care of them while they're still here. Okay.
Well, do you have any more information you want to share on estate planning that we haven't covered? I mean, you were pretty comprehensive there.
Sure,
touched on a lot of things, but did it stir anything else that you might want to talk about briefly here?
Yeah, just a couple things. The first thing is you'll see a lot of ads for people doing wills online for $50 or less. And I know that's tempting. I know it is. I would rather spend $50 than $1,000 myself. I get it. It's not fun. But I can't tell you how many times I have had to counsel folks whose parents thought they did the right thing and they bought a will kit online and spent less than $100 on it. But there's problems, such as the will is a one-size-fits-all, and the states aren't one-size-fits-all, so it might not even comply with Georgia law. It might not have the requisite number of witnesses. It might not be notarized. There's a lot of things that might be overlooked. It might be missing certain language. Sure. And so by saving a few $100s at the outset, what you're doing is costing your family thousands after you're gone.
Right.
And we don't want that to happen. So pricing for estate plans is designed to be affordable to everybody. I want everybody to be able to afford one. And I make it very user-friendly. If you wanted to use me for an estate plan, I have an online questionnaire that gives me about 98 to 100% of the information I need to get started drafting an estate plan. I make it all very, very user-friendly and not designed to intimidate, just designed to inform and to make sure that you're happy with the product that you get.
Mm-hmm. And you understand it.
And you fully understand
That's the key.
Yeah, and that you're not afraid to ask questions.
Right.
And
I'm sure you tell people when they can, don't be afraid to ask questions.
Exactly.
That's how you learn. Jen, that was great information. I thank you for being here and sharing that. And I appreciate your time today, and we're going to have fun with this project.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm glad to be here and glad to be doing it.
Yeah, and for the listeners who may want additional information on estate planning and want to contact Jennifer, her information will be on our show notes. And if you'd like to give a shout out with your information too, go ahead and do that right now.
Sure. I have a website. It's DeLoachLawPractice.com. It's DeLoach lawpractice.com. Feel free to email me, Jennifer at DeLoachLawPractice.com. And my phone number is 770-209-2242. I would love to speak with anybody about their questions on estate planning.
And again, I highly recommend her. Also, if the listeners have any questions or comments on the show in general, please email us at chasingexcellencepodcast@gmail.com. Jen, I didn't ask you this ahead of time, but let's get into this. We're doing this on a quarterly basis, so your next show would be February. Do you have an idea of what topic you want to do?
I have a few ideas on that one. I have a couple of lawyers who I've talked to about this, and I might be talking about family law and immigration in that intersection.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Well, that'd be good. The reason I asked, and I meant to ask you earlier, so I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but I thought it'd be good information in case any of the listeners would like to submit some questions ahead of time to the Chasing Excellence podcast at gmail.com. Then we could have them ahead of time, and you could get a little more in depth with the topic, because I know that's a hot topic right now.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we're going to nail it. It's going to be that.
Okay.
So you're stuck. You've got to do that.
Wonderful.
Yeah. Well, Jen, thanks again. This is going to be an awesome opportunity for you, and you're going to do great. And you've got so much good information, and I keep telling everybody, you're just so good at delivering the information.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. She's a nice girl. Listen to me. Okay. All right, everyone. I hope that you enjoy the show. And if you do, I'd advise you to hit subscribe and share it with all your friends. And thank you for being with us today. I am your host, Kathy Hogan, and this is Chasing Excellence. As always, stay fearless, friends. See ya.